want to welcome everybody back. Generation Engine, you may notice right out of the gate that we are missing a third head this week. Captain Rowett is extremely busy with family and kids this week. So I get the pleasure of just having myself and one of my most favorite people on the show that I've known for several years now. I actually went to his firehouse several years ago. We were out buffing, and we beat him first due to a small trash fire, which was pretty cool. But just kind of recap, been a crazy couple months. I want to personally thank FDIC again this year. Just unbelievable of everything they're doing right now. The show's getting bigger and better. They're expanding classes. The workshops are just awesome. The hands-on workshops I was lucky to be a small part of this year were amazing. And if you've never had a chance to go, highly recommend you go. If you went years ago and you haven't been back for years, highly recommend you go back. There's a lot of really cool things happening at FDIC, and I think we're just going to see it just continue to grow and get better and better and better under David Rhodes' leadership, and his entire team are just so amazing at everything they're doing. So don't forget, because I did this actually at my FDIC class. I went through my whole program, and with about 7 minutes left, remembered I did not tell my class who I was or anything else. So we'll remember today. My name's Todd Edwards, 31 plus years with the city of Atlanta and in the fire service for about 43 now. And now I'm just fortunate and blessed to get to travel some and teach and get to work with a lot of incredible people throughout the fire service. So with that said, I'm going to allow, and what I always do is I want our guest to introduce himself, because he can introduce himself better than I can ever introduce him. So Dave, if you could, please.
Yeah, thanks so much, Todd. Dave Dubowski here, everybody, from St. Louis, engine boss in North St. Louis County, where all the action's at, we like to say. Great place to work. We go to fires on a pretty regular basis, so we're pretty fortunate there. Got a real good group of guys up in North St. Louis County to work at. I'm very proud to be up there. Been doing it a long time. I started volunteering back in the mid 80s. So I'm up over 40 years now. I got hired 40 years ago in the department. And as you well know, when you get to about my age, Todd, people ask you two questions. They say, when are you going to retire, and how much longer you got? So so my answer now is I'm just getting warmed up. I still love going to the firehouse every day and still love going to fires. And it's just been a real blessing for me to be in this career for such a long time and staying healthy. That's the big thing, staying healthy all these years. Besides that, I'm also president of the Muddy River Fools chapter here in St. Louis. And I am on the executive board of the Fools International as the secretary, which it sounds cool, but I'm the guy that makes the membership cards. That's about it. So you join the Fools, I mail out the membership cards to you. So, and anybody that knows me knows that I like to take a few pictures here and there as well. So that's pretty much about me.
And you have a son on the job.
Yes. My Michael, very proud of him. He's works up at Chief Jason Hovelman's department, the Florissant Valley Fire District in North St. Louis County as well. And we're both on the same shift. Michael's been up at Florissant for about 5 years now. And obviously, as a youngster, he spends most of the days on the ambulance. But, on a good day, he's on the engine or the truck. So we've been to about 3 or 4 fires together over the past few years. So that's always exciting to be able to see my kid on a fire.
Yeah, that's very cool. I was very fortunate that prior to my dad retirement and then passing, that got to make a lot of work with him as our fire chief and being our boss, and him basically supervising all these kids, because we're all kids, volunteers at that time, and him trying to grab a hold of us so we didn't do anything stupid. So yeah, it's such a cool experience to have that, and I'm sure Michael's going to remember this years down the road when you're retired and all that, which if you ever retire and try something else someday. Yeah. So I want to go back to something you said kind of about that people said they know you like to take a few pictures. You just recently in fire engineering had a really cool article, and I was reading through this and I thought, man, there were some really cool little points there. And Buff to Boss, and education and photos. And I was reading this going, wow, what a cool experience. So give us just a quick overview of that article. I really encourage everybody that's listening to this and downloading this goes and finds that article and takes a quick look at it. But kind of give us the overview of that, because you say something in there that I really want you to hit. And one of the things you had in the article is about being a fire buff, just taking pictures makes you a better officer. And I want to kind of hear your explanation behind that, because I thought that was a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, and it all goes back to my dad. I can blame him. God rest his soul. And he was a World War II veteran, landed in North Africa. They made their way up to Italy, and he had a camera, which very few and far between those days. But he had always had a few pictures on display at the house. But then after he passed, we found boxes and boxes of these, incredible photos that he had. And I just always remember my dad having a camera and taking a lot of pictures, a lot of family pictures. And that's how I kind of got into photography. And once I got on the job, I kind of combined my love of photography as well as my love of the fire service. And living where I did, I was 5 minutes away from the city of St. Louis. And back in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of fires, a lot of big fires. So I had my trusty scanner and my camera. And man, I was on the way and out the door. I was young and single and didn't have a care in the world. So that's what I did. And been doing it about 40 years. I've got tens of thousands of photos. One of these days, instead of them just sitting on my bookshelves, I maybe get a Twitter or Tweeter or X account, whatever they call it now, and a Facebook page, and start sharing some of these photos because it's history now, and history is out there to be shared. But yeah, looking back, that's what the article is based on. Is now we call it fire porn, looking at videos, but we didn't have that back then. So I would go to a fire and I would print out my pictures and put them in a photo album and, be able to take them back and show the guys at the station and we could learn from those photos. And obviously not to criticize, which is what we still try not to do with the brothers that are out there. And everything's in our face now. But back then, you'd wait for your fire engineering or other trade magazines to come, and you were looking at fires that happened 3-4 months ago. And that was the news. Now it's instantaneous. So I learned a lot of things over the years, and it's mostly from the incredible men and women that I met on the fire scene. And it's just been a great ride. And, through my photos, we're able to use those as a tool and pop a photo up and say, hey, man, what do you see here? Because as cool as videos are, I still think there's a whole lot more than just looking at a photo and being able to analyze it. And it's a split second of a fire and say, hey, man, what do you see? What are you going to do?
And as you're saying all this, I literally was thinking that to myself. And well, the first thing I thought to myself, to be honest with you, when I read the article was, what a cool book that would be. Because I don't care who you are, firemen are going to look at pictures. We'd rather have a picture and a sticker than anything else. So sure. I thought, man, what a cool book that would be, breaking it down in eras like when you first started buffing all the way up to where you're at in your career now, and photos like that. And I agree with you 100%. I use videos in my presentations, but what's different is the video gives you the answers to what you're trying to teach sometimes, where a still photo, and I just did this at FDIC, I put up one picture. There's a garage, well-involved attached garage fire, and I had to stop the debate because guys were debating tactics on this, and where would you enter? What line? Would you go deck gun? Would you go monitor? Would you go 2.5 inch 3/4? And it's funny how one still photo can engage so much conversation. And so I love that you were saying all that and how that really can translate into a very simple training exercise at the kitchen table.
Absolutely. And, the fire engineering magazine is laying at your table and what's on it? It's a picture of a fire. Let's talk about it. Let's take a look at it. For those of you from our generation, you remember Bill Manning's old the White album, or the Beatles had the White album, but it was the white cover, I guess, of Fire Engineering, everybody called it. And it was just a plain white magazine. And what I remember what Bill did, because people were really complaining about pictures and what they're seeing. And hey, this guy didn't have his gloves on in that split millisecond, or this guy didn't have his, mask on for that split millisecond of a fire. But what that photo does, it captures that split millisecond of a fire. It's not a perfect fire ground. And I remember the White magazine was Bill's way of saying, hey, it's not a perfect fire ground, and quit criticizing these photographs because it's not a perfect fire ground.
Yeah, and I like that. And I always try, and my favorite is the stills of just the structure of the building on fire. And you're right, because, I think partly society, like you've said before, we immediately look at the firefighter and go, oh, his waist strap isn't on his breathing. And I use those photos too, because I do use that as far as, hey, what are some things we should be watching for, especially when you start talking about officers. If I see one of my members without his waist strap or something, to say to him, hey, bro, get your waist strap so you don't become an entanglement hazard once we make entry. So I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan of the stills. And I think you kind of said, but I kind of want to go right back to that. I know you don't want to be critical, but do you have any specifics about buffing that made you a better officer? That's something you can say that you saw that you now utilize, and something you could share to help maybe somebody listening or watching the video podcast.
Oh, just the experience of going to a fire. We're all limited of how many fires we get to go to on duty. I went to a heck of a whole lot more fires on my day off back in those days than I did at the firehouse. And just by standing back and watching them, and whether it's my department or the city department or one of the other suburban departments, just sitting back and watching them in person, seeing how they operate, how they do things. Everybody does things different, obviously, but to be able to be there and see that experience, that was huge to me. And then, taking the photographs, and back in the day, you had to go to Walgreens and get them developed. And then, and then you get them, and then you get to go to round two and start looking at the photos again. And it wasn't just the St. Louis area. We got to go all over the place over the years. We used to go to Chicago a lot and ride with those guys. Went up to the FDNY a couple times, Detroit back in the heyday. So those were all totally different operations. But every place we went to, you could always pick up some of their tricks of the trade and try to. And it's no different from going to FDIC and taking a class from a guy that's out of town. It might not be the way you do things, but if you hear something you like, by gosh, bring it back. And the same on the fire ground. If I was at a fire ground and I saw something that I liked or didn't like, I touched about one of the things was positive pressure. Fans in the early days, guys were just popping them up right and left. And next thing you know, 2.5 stories through the roof. I still think about those days, and I'm still not a proponent of using that PPV fan during fire attack. We'll wait, make sure we know where the fire's at, that the fire's out, and then we'll start that fan up.
That's funny you said that, because our introduction in Atlanta fire to positive pressure was a chief who went to a class. We didn't even know the fans, but he was having the second or third due company drop a line at the front door and using a fog pattern and pressurizing behind us. We didn't know what he was doing. We had no training in it, and we're trying to figure out why the fire kept wrapping around us and going up to the second floor. So it's very funny you said that, how we learn. And I think probably earlier in both our careers, we learned from a lot of our personal own fire ground mistakes, both by ourselves and by others. So I love that you said all that, because I think it does make for better officers. And I think sometimes your mistakes are always way better than your successes. So we get lax on our successes. Mistakes is what I think really drives and builds us to be better each and every time. You mentioned something, and back in the heyday, and you almost sound like we're celebrating it, but back in those early and mid 80s, one of my first experiences with my dad was we went up to Detroit on Devil's Night. And this is when it was, you didn't have to have a radio. You could literally park a little bit somewhere in the city and go, there's a header, there's a header, there's a header, and just drive back and forth to fires.
Right.
All of us, oh, there we got this one knocked down, drive to the next one. And such a cool experience as a brand new, barely firefighter one kid, and my dad driving like a bat out of hell through the city of Detroit, just going to fires. I have no idea why we were doing it. Just knowing, oh, look at the fires, look at the fires. And my dad whipping out the old school Polaroid.
Yeah.
Click and hand it to me and go, shake it. And yeah. So it was just funny how you look back at some of those things and some of those experiences and what they do. Something else said in the article, I don't want to give up the whole article. I want to do just the article. There's a couple other things I really want to get to tonight or this afternoon is you had a statement in there about be kind. And I thought that was interesting because I see companies, I've walked in the firehouses and the guys are like escorting you right to dinner. And I've walked into some and it's like they have no desire for you to be there in their fire station. Can you kind of hit on that? Because I thought that was really important for especially younger firefighters to kind of hear your experiences with that and why.
Yeah, we met so many great people over the years, welcoming firemen, when we traveled, and you try to bring that back home with you. And but then on a local level, we didn't always have that. And you got to know real quick who the good bosses were. That if you were hanging around their station, you were one of them. They'd welcome you into their station, invite you for a meal. But that wasn't everywhere. So looking back, I met some incredible people, some incredible company officers, and they were all at busy stations. These guys wanted to go to fires, and the welcome mat was always open. So try to bring that back to your house. Not to say we get a lot of out-of-town firemen at our house. We just don't. But take it a step further, keep that front bay door open. There's guys that say, well, we got to close the door because I work in a bad neighborhood. Well, we'll talk to some of our friends down at Houston and talk about having that bay door open and how that bay door has changed their life and their family's life by just becoming a part of that community. And I do. When I'm on duty, the guys know that front bay door is open. What if somebody still steals the TV? Okay, well, we got 20 freaking TVs in the house anymore, Not everybody in the neighborhood is a criminal. That's right. Just a few, and that's all it takes is just a few bad apples. But I like my firehouse being a part of the community, and that's something that I learned from over the years of just visiting all these great firehouses and meeting all these great firefighters. But be kind. Anytime a fireman stops by, welcome them in, invite them for a meal, but take it a step further and maybe not so much inviting, all the local residents for a meal, because next thing you know, everybody in town will hear there's a free meal at the firehouse. But bring the local residents in, show them the fire truck, show them the firehouse, and let them know that you as firefighters are part of that community, that you work in.
Yeah, I love that you said all that. I 100% agree. Big believer. One of my first stations, our station was at the entry to the old school housing projects, and that door was open. The back door was open, and it was for that reason. Some days you had a bunch of people coming and going all days, coming in to see the fire trucks, but it means so much for somebody to be able to walk right into a firehouse that either ask a question, get help, or just see the dang fire truck. The kids just wanting to see the fire truck and getting a little air in their tire, those type of things. We sat in the evenings, we always sat on the front ramp. We had a great awning over top of as a single engine boss, we had an awning over this old firehouse, and that's where we drug our chairs out there after dinner and cleanup's done, and we're just kind of chilling for the night. That's where we were at. And the community knew that's where we were at.
Sure. In the article, I mentioned some of the officers from the city of St. Louis Fire Department. I was a young kid. I didn't have the networking. I didn't know, people like you back in those days. So it meant so much to me to be able to, hang out down in the city where the fires were at and be welcomed into these firehouses. And I also talk about one of the firefighters, Denny Walsh. Denny Walsh was a legendary firefighter in the city of St. Louis, worked at Engine Company 17, which back in those days was a busy house. And every time I'd stop by, and I talk about this in the article, Denny would always say, "Hey, Dave, the dynamite factory is going to burn tonight across the street." There was not a dynamite factory across the street on Martin Luther King Drive. But that was Denny's way of saying, "Hey, we're going to a fire tonight."
That's awesome. It's such a great experience. And I love how you've kind of blended your passion for the fire service along with your passion for photography, your passion for your family, and then combine all that with the good, the bad, the mistakes, being nice, being a better officer. I think it's very unique. And again, I hope I'm putting these ideas in your head that what a cool book that would be. Even if you just did a book of pictures, this fire happened here, and firemen just be like, "Oh yeah, picture book, yeah, picture book." And I'd be the first one. As long as I get an autographed copy, Dave. So you need to start working on that ASAP. In your introduction, and some guys know this, some guys don't. I've kind of seen in the last couple years, almost like a fool's resurgence in training. And I'm excited to see it. I really am. But you've been a member. One of my best interactions ever was being at a Muddy River Fools event. And I thought, wow, every Fools chapter should be like the Muddy River. And they have a great rep across the country. Kind of tell me how tell us how you got involved with the Fools and why you guys or your chapter seems to be a little more successful than others.
Yeah, it's not because of me, Todd. I'll tell you that right now.
You're sending out the membership card.
That's right. That's right. I think the first time I ever heard about the Fools was up at FDIC. One of the first years at FDIC, I met Ron Smith from the Gary Fire Department. And we're still good friends to this date. We got to spend a lot of time last week up at FDIC, which is always great to see Ron. But after a few years of hanging out with Ron up at FDIC, all of a sudden we weren't seeing him as much. And I hope Ron listens to this because we got our feelings hurt. But soon we found out Ron was hanging out with these group of guys called the Fools. And okay, well, then you want to learn about who the Fools are. So there was no chapter in St. Louis, but we knew about the Fools because Ron Smith was hanging out with them at FDIC. So Alton Fire Department, where we took you over in Illinois with all those cool old multifamily buildings, the old river town. One of the fellows over there, Mark Harris, he took a trip up to IFSI up at Champaign, Illinois for a conference. And he saw some guys walking around with Southside Fools shirts, which is the Chicago chapter. So Mark Harris asked these guys, "Hey, what's the Southside Fools?" And they sat down and talked to him. And Mark brought it back to the St. Louis area. And it was just going to be for the Illinois guys. And our good friend Tommy D, he said, "Hey, Mark, I got some buddies over on the St. Louis side. Can we bring those guys along too?" So back in 2006, we had our first Muddy River Fools meeting at this old downtown firehouse in in Alton, which is a bar now, the Firehouse Tavern. And 2006, that's how we began. We got a good thing going. But then in 2010, we went to the first Fools International Convention, which was in Orlando. And then we really got to experience what the Fools was about. We got to meet brothers and sisters from across the country that were like-minded. They have that same passion that we have. And then as things started to grow up at FDIC with the Brotherhood Bash, then all of a sudden you're exposed to a whole lot of more Fools from across the country. So we've been regulars at Fools Convention every year. We always travel well, we say, just like a good college sports fan base does. But through that, and being so active, Rich Stack, who is training boss up at Chicago Fire Department now, he came up to me a couple of years ago and said, "Hey, Dave, what would you think about being on the executive board of the Fools International?" And you just don't say no to Rich Stack.
Yeah.
So that's how I got on the International E-Board. And it's been a lot of fun so far, being able to meet a lot of good people. But back to Muddy River, it's the people. I mean, we've got about 125 members. Diversity is, one of those keywords in society now, and I'm not talking a black and white or green and brown or yellow thing. I'm talking about the diversity of our members. We've got guys in our chapter that are members of the heavy rescue squads in the city of St. Louis Fire Department. But then we've also got rural volunteer fire chiefs, from across the river in Illinois, and everybody brings something to the table. And I think that is our strength, is our big diversity that we have. And it's just a great bunch of people. And we get together every other month and drink a couple beers and have a training nugget and just talk shop. And it's really, really been good for me. And it's what I'm about. The Fools really exemplifies, what I'm about.
I kind of always have looked at, especially coming my career starting with the combination department, being on the volunteer side, and coming to a big city department like Atlanta. But one of the first things I kind of realized early on in my career here in the city was I missed the Brotherhood. We had, great fire, just unbelievable firemen, obviously. But you have a guy who lives on Fayetteville, Georgia, and then another guy living in Barrow, Georgia. Well, that's a 2-hour drive. So get those little get-togethers just, wasn't like that. You didn't have that off-the-job connection.
Yeah.
And I kind of saw that with some of the Fools chapters, of bringing guys together. It wasn't every weekend, but we got to see each other and be parts of different things. And, like I said, it wasn't, I think sometimes it gets a bad rep that everybody thinks, it's just a big drinking event, and it's really not. It's so much more. Just to be able to share, hey, we had this job and it didn't go well, or we had this job and we did this. We've never done this before, and it worked amazingly well. It's such a blessing now to have those little chapters and the bigger chapters where guys can actually come together and share, do some training. I know you guys have brought in speakers before to, kind of up that level a little bit and try different things. And I would love to see the Fools chapter just continue to grow and do everything that they're doing right now. And the Fools Bash in Indy, if you've never attended that, such a great time. And again, it's just all these like-minded people, the bagpipes coming through, the huge American flag, which was a little sketchy this year with the wind.
Yeah.
They got a hang right there. Gust of wind had that monster flag wrapping around their rope system, but such a good time.
Yeah. And I'll back up to what you said a couple minutes ago, Todd, is you're right, dude. The past couple of years has just been huge growth for the membership with the Fools International. It's all post-COVID. And not just we are gaining a lot of new chapters out there, but a lot of chapters that went dormant. I think we were pretty fortunate here in St. Louis, still getting able to be firefighters on our day off and get out in training. Mm-hmm. Talking to Fools members from across the country, they were shut down. They were locked down. The closest thing we had to that was when we had our training conference in November. It was probably right in the middle of COVID, but the state of Illinois deemed it necessary training. So we didn't miss our year. But right in the middle of the conference, the police department showed up. And somebody said, "Hey, Dubowski, go talk to the cops, see what they want." So I go out there, and the cop says, "We have a report of illegal bingo here." Yeah, because where we have our conference every year is a big Madison County Firemen's Hall where they have the bingo.
Right.
Somebody drove by, saw the cars, and thought there was illegal bingo going on at the height of COVID. Yeah. So that was great. But yeah, man, awesome. We're so happy with seeing what's going on now that COVID's behind us. And it's just phenomenal. And whether you're a small chapter, whether you're a big chapter, if you don't have a chapter, get a hold of me, secretary, foolsinternational.com. But while we're talking about that, dude, and FDIC and the Brotherhood Bash, I really got to give a shout out to Chief David Rhodes and his support for the Fools International. He came with the Fools Brotherhood Bash like he did, in so many years past, since he's been the head of fire engineering the past couple of years. And he always is welcome, and he's always gives a great talk. And this year we were thrilled to death that during opening ceremonies, Chief David Rhodes gave a shout out to the Fools International during opening ceremonies. So I think Chief Rhodes sees the importance of us, and just as we see the importance of a successful FDIC every year.
Yeah, and I think what makes it very unique where we're at today with Fools chapters, FDIC, and everything else is that there is a back and forth support where Fools chapters and instructors across the country are 100% supporting FDIC, probably more so than I've ever seen over the last 30 plus years. But what's really interesting is how much fire engineering and FDIC are reciprocating that support and that encouragement, and not looking at it as, well, if they go to Fools trainings, they're not coming to FDIC. And it's so not that case anymore. And I really love seeing how training in general is starting to kind of just, there's no boundaries now. There's not this, and we're this, and we have to go to this. And it's so good to kind of see all those lines just being wiped off, and that we're all here to make ourselves and our current brothers and sisters and our future brothers and sisters so much better. I think it's important to understand that Fools International isn't just about just going to a once or bi-monthly or even quarterly training thing. They are also heavily involved in nonprofit organizations. They are highly supportive of my wife, Kathy, and her partner, Tracy, in really getting more and more deeply involved with family things, as far as the fire family. Fire Wives is a huge event now, and Fools International really has stepped up to help support some of their programs. And those are all things that the Fools chapters do, and that probably aren't very well known. That I think, the guys who don't know about it, it's a real quick, easy Google search. Google in Fools International and kind of see what it's really truly about. And it's more than just the training. There's so many other little avenues and support systems that they do. And I hope everybody will go out and look at that. So Dave, right before you left, I was about to ask you this, because I kind of want to hear your intake being a senior man in the fire service. Have you seen, and you travel, you get out, and you've been to some other places I've been to at conferences and things. At one point, a couple of years ago, there was kind of this, oh God, there's too many conferences. It's saturating the market. It's not going to be any good, to where we're at today. Do you think there's still, in your eyes, such a huge benefit to these, I don't want to say micro, but these, 40, 50, 60 person training events versus the 30, I saw the number 37,000 of us all at once. Indianapolis, I'll be high-fiving the hell out of David Rhodes for the amount of money that city just made off of us.
Yep.
But do you see a benefit, especially with having a young son on the job?
Oh my gosh, yes. What these kids these days on the job are exposed to, we never had. You had your major fire conferences. You had FDIC. You had FDIC West. You had the Firehouse Expo. You had a couple other ones that were big. But, man, just the explosion of these small regional conferences, a lot of I'm not going to give us all the credit, but I think a lot of that credit goes to the Fools International and the chapters and the conferences that they put on. What Rusty Ricker does up with the New England Fools up in the Northeast is phenomenal. What his Fools chapter does. Obviously, what Kurt does down on Pensacola Beach with County Fire Tactics, that is just incredible. Wichita Hot out there that the Fools of Oz put on, dozens and dozens and dozens that I don't have time to name, but the opportunity's there. And not everybody's, you talked about my kid, where Michael works at Florissant, very supportive of that next generation of firefighters getting out and training. Unfortunately, not everybody has that kind of organization that they work for. Every organization needs to strive to do that. and to get your people out to some of these regional conferences and see what's out there, because there's more to life than just goes on in Atlanta, or there's more to life than just what goes on in St. Louis County, Missouri.
100%. One of the things we're getting ready to open registration for, it's just very small, but it's 2 days of just, skills under fire, live fire events, VES, live victims, rapid adventure, survival skills. But one of the things that we did when we started doing these smaller little ones with our team was we wanted to keep it affordable, because we understood that not every department is going to drop, a $2,100, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to send a guy off to a couple of days of training.
Yep.
So we've always kind of looked at, can a 20-year-old for 2 full days of training, free lunches, a couple nights in a hotel with a partner for under $500, and that's always our strive. We always kind of go, okay, here's the cost to pay for the instructors. How can a kid do this? And you start adding the numbers, and we always strive for that with hotels, and I think Kurt does that down in County Fire Tactics. Just a small deal can maybe help that kid go, you know what? I just worked an overtime shift. I can go to this training. I'll be able to afford to go to this training. I've seen we were having this conversation the other night while we were at FDIC. The increased level of student compared to a few years ago. These guys are coming to these events, and we're, as instructors, we are literally having to find new ways to challenge some of these kids. We got a new thing we do with forcible entry, because you just hand a kid a door now, they rip that thing down like, all right, what else you got? And so we're finding new ways to challenge them, new stressors, things to make them better. So when they come to these training events, they leave with one more little thing in their back pocket they'll go and use. They're going to use the skill sets if we give them the skill sets.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I think maybe I see that's one of the biggest evolutions over the years. Back when I'd go to a conference, it was about the brotherhood. It was about hanging out with the guys. It was about drinking the beer and all that, and a little training. With this group of kids coming on now, they want to train.
Yeah.
And they want to train all day long, and they want to learn. And the brotherhood, it's important to a lot of them, but it's sort of a sidebar. Mm-hmm. So that is so cool that these kids just want to come in. And like you say, you have to challenge them. They have to constantly be challenged. And with so many opportunities out there, it's available. You just have to find it. And I'll give my chapter, Muddy River, a little shout out. We do one big fundraiser a year, and that goes to a training scholarship that we have. And I tell all these new chapters coming on board, hey, we're going to have this raffle, or we're going to have this benefit, and it's going to go to XYZ charity in town. I said, well, that's great, but think about investing in your members. Mm-hmm. Take some of that money and hold it back for the people in your chapter. So if they want to go to that $500, seminar somewhere in your region of the country, that money's there, and they can take advantage of that, because there are so many departments that just won't allow them to do that.
Right. Yeah. And I hope that trend, goes away, but so many departments struggle. If one of the first things you see a lot of departments do is immediately when times get a little tough, they cut the training budget.
Yep.
Or they are very inherent and strict on, we will only train to these exact standards. And it hurt. I think it hurts firefighters sometimes when they are in that little bubble and that's all they know. And we get students like that too. And they're like, we've never seen a one-person ladder throw. We've never seen low shoulder versus high shoulder. We've never seen moving a ladder from a distance up to a building, then having to make the entry. So we're always looking for those little things like that. But man, it's so cool. We had a really cool experience. We were in Chelsea, Alabama just recently doing our Skills Under Fire program. 2 days after the class, a kid emailed his captain, and his captain contacted me. He actually used 2 or 3 different things at a fire 2 days after that program. He said, I wouldn't have known that. I don't know if I would have handled the fire the same way when it came to getting out. Very, brick building, every window bricked over. And because he was operating in those kind of conditions, it really set him up for a successful event. So I love it. I know there's hundreds of stories from hundreds of guys across the country that we again, this is the benefits of going to these trainings and going to a Fools event or an FDIC, that you come back and one day you go, wow, I just used what I learned. So it does pay dividends. It really does. It always seem that way sometimes, but I really believe that. I think the other thing you were kind of mentioning, how much these kids want to train. One of the things we always talk about all our classes is we beg and encourage the guys after class to come hang out with us. Not with the whole class, but we want all the students to hang out with us. So we always do the immediate off the training ground, so we're not breaking anybody's rules. We'll go to a parking lot at the hotel we're staying at and do dirty beers. Yep. Nobody's allowed to shower. If you shower, you can't participate. You have to do it in your same nasty, I know, cancer and all that, but it's just for a little bit. And everybody just stands around, and it gives these young guys a chance to talk to senior instructors. But what I really encourage is the guy from St. Louis talking to the guy from New Mexico and getting those, that networking you're talking about. So I think there's so many benefits to these smaller conferences and obviously the big ones, but I think the networking at those events is probably even greater than even at FDIC.
Yeah, I always send out an email before FDIC to all the members, and it's the same phrase every year: get out of your comfort circle. When you get to FDIC or any of these other conferences, get out of your comfort circle, meet some new people. Don't just hang out with the brothers and sisters from your department that you went there with. Mm-hmm. Don't get there and see some other guys from St. Louis or Atlanta or this town that you already know. Get out of that comfort zone. And boy, it's paid dividends for me immensely with the friendships I've made over the years, and treasures of friendships that I could never replace.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. So me and you obviously talked over the last couple of days, and then you were sharing some stuff with me. And I want to start this way. How many stations do you guys have, first and foremost? In your department, how many firehouses?
1.
So this is important that we say this. And you have automatic aid with the surrounding community, correct?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
So let's back up. So for people about to listen to this, our hero here has had a very interesting 2025 already with some of his experiences as a fire buff and some of his experiences of being on the job. So I want you to first kind of share what you experienced and witnessed when you were out in Cali during the wildland fires.
Yeah, it's something I'll never forget. Going out there to experience, the birthplace of incident command and just the enormity of the events that the California firefighters have to deal with has been something on my bucket list forever. So January, I guess it was January, the first week of January, got a text from a buddy of mine up in the Northeast, fellow photographer. He's a professional photographer. I just liken myself to a guy with a camera. And he said, hey, Santa Ana winds next week. Keep it on your map. So back and forth all weekend. And finally, we're like, okay, let's do it, man. So by Sunday, we had bought our tickets in the LAX. And as I was approaching LAX, I saw this huge plume of smoke. I had no idea what it was. It turns out it was the start of the Palisades fire. The Palisades fire had just started 90 minutes prior to my flight arriving. John had already had the car and the hotel reservations, and he was waiting for me. And we jumped in the car and off we went. And the next 4 days was something that I'll never forget. I shot over 3,000 photos. I won't talk about it on the Fire Engineering podcast, but I happened to get the cover shot of one of the competitors' magazines. But a lot of Fire Engineering featured a lot of my pictures as well. So, but dude, it was just something I'll never forget. The people I met, apocalyptic is the word I'll use. But I got to mention one of the sisters that I met out there too. And day one, we didn't see a fire truck. I mean, we pretty much watched the Palisades burn, and those brothers and sisters were so overwhelmed. And the neighborhood we pretty much camped out in, that was just an unlucky neighborhood that didn't have a fire truck show up that night, like so many other neighborhoods. Day 2, we went over to the Eaton fire in the Palisades. Palisades was day 1, went over to the Eaton fire day 2, and we start to see some strike teams show up. But there was no water. All the hydrants were dry. So these guys were, trying to protect the next block with 500 gallons. But as we're going along, I start talking to some firefighters and start talking to some really cool brothers and sisters. And I have no idea what it's like to be a firefighter out there. And they're sharing these stories. And one of the first firefighters I met, it was a captain with CAL FIRE Riverside County. Her name was Becky Marodi. And man, super cool chick. Answered all my questions. I asked if I could get a picture of her and her crew. So they posed with the buildings burning in the background. And I kept in touch with Becky, just as I did so many other firefighters I met, and shared photos with her. Sad to say, about a month after Becky got back, she was dead. Her wife had stabbed her to death. But it was just a chance meeting. And it's something I'll never forget on a personal level. Luckily, they just picked the gal up that stabbed her to death in Mexico, and hopefully she'll rot in jail the rest of her life. But getting to meet Becky is something I'll never forget, and it's just a shame how it all turned out. And so many other little personal notes along the way. I hopped in a plane 4 days later and flew back to St. Louis. But for the folks out there, they're still dealing with that devastation.
Yeah, and I thought the reason I bring this up for this event or this video podcast is mine and yours perspective of the fire service is broad based as we think we are. If you drop me in the middle of the Palisades fire, I wouldn't know what to do. I would literally be probably running with the civilians to get the hell out of there. I would have no clue, especially when you start looking at if you stacked up challenges to a fire scene, there's not one challenge they didn't face between staffing, water shortage, apparatus shortage, winds, weather, conditions, all of these things all in one incident. Yep. A massive, huge incident. And but one of the really personal, cool stories that I saw and read about was why one of the captains from, I think it was the county, was fighting fires. His house was burning at the same time. His family had escaped, obviously, to safety, but he didn't come off the line. He just, kept doing what he knew he had to do. He knew from being an experienced officer what anything he could do about his home. And I was trying to put that in my head of how can you function especially as a boss on the line, devastation everywhere, but knowing 2 or 3 miles up the road, your house is also fully engulfed in fire and you're not going to have anything to go home to. Yeah.
And that was our first place we went to when we were going day 2 over to Altadena for the Eaton fire. My buddy John, he's buddies with the LA firefighter, and he got a call. Hey, I got a bunch of guys over here. We're trying to protect my house. So we're firefighters first. We went over there. Luckily, they had a pretty good handle on it. He never lost his house, but that was our first destination, was to go help this brother firefighter. It wasn't to go take pictures on that second day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I got to share one more personal story with you, Todd, but because there's a million of them out there. But on day 1, when we were up at the Palisades fire, not a fire truck in sight. Once again, these guys were overwhelmed. We're up in the Palisades and met this really wonderful couple. They had a house out there for 30-something years. The view of the fire was best from their backyard. So I asked them, hey, you mind if we go to your backyard? And, oh, no, they welcomed us in the backyard. We had our gear on. We were taking pictures and just got talking to this nice couple. The wife, she brought out a pitcher of water and 2 glasses for John and myself and made sure to let us know it was filtered water as this huge monster of a fire is heading their way. And John, he's been out there before on these incidents. He was trying to assure them that we would stay as long as we could. We had 2 green lines. There was a garden hose on each side of the house, and we were just wetting their house down the best we could. John was assuring them, hey, we will stay until we can't stay. So finally they had to leave. And we were strangers to these folks. They knew we were firemen, but we were strangers. And the last words out of this lady's mouth, the homeowner said to us was, I left my house unlocked if you guys need anything. That doesn't happen.
No.
That doesn't happen. But she trusted us. Why? Because we were firefighters. Mm-hmm. It was a $3 million house. And she trusted us because we were firefighters.
I'm so glad you shared that. And I think guys listening and everything will see sometimes we forget the trust the public has in us. Yeah. And we should hold that, very close to our hearts and always rise to be better than everybody else. I mean, I'm not saying that in a condescending way or an arrogant way, but as a service as a whole, we always have to be that standard. We should hold ourselves and we should hold our counterparts accountable to be at that standard. That somebody would just walk away from a $3 million home and go, you guys got it. We trust you. Yep. Without ever having to say it. They knew in their hearts nothing was going to happen, with you, like you guys were going to go there and, hey, let's load up all their valuables. It's just crazy, but such a cool story right there. So you get back.
We get back. You
get home, and I know it's not immediately, but then you get to experience with your own fire department. And unfortunately, Dave, like I told you, I was still new or running the board here, so I could not figure out how to do the pictures. But you sent me a couple of them. You guys had your own wind-driven fire.
Yeah, 2 months.
Let's touch on that.
2 months later, I guess I got to back up. I'll explain how St. Louis County works. Yes, my district, we have one firehouse. So in St. Louis County, which is broken up into 42 separate paid fire departments. I know that's a lot, but we make it work somehow. Pretty much one dispatch agency, one union. So with those 42 paid fire departments, there's probably about 80 something stations. So we are resource friendly. We have resources out the wazoo in St. Louis County, about 1 million people in St. Louis County. Next to us we border the city of St. Louis in my district, another 35 companies down there, plus the surrounding area. So we are resource friendly in St. Louis. So, March 14th, and it was the forecast was out there. It was just like a California day, high wind advisory, low humidity. It was March. Everything was still brown outside, and went in. That was our day one. We worked the 4896 shift. We started off with a tractor trailer on fire up on the bridge going to Illinois, and it looked up coming down the road. It was just the rear duals burning, a lot of black smoke. The tank wasn't burning at all, thank goodness. And things kind of quieted down, had lunch, and we all knew we needed to get a little nap in because you just had that feeling it was going to be a bopping day. So I think I was able to crash in the chair for about an hour, and then the calls started coming in because the winds really started picking up. And, brush fire, we call them brush fires, whatever, grass fire, wildland, whatever, we call them brush fires. So brush fire with exposures, they were coming in right and left. And a lot of them, whoever made the call at the dispatch center did a great job that day because they were sending a full assignment, on these brush fires with exposures. So we'd pull up, try to knock it down as quick as we could and move on to the next one. A couple of them got the sides of houses going. But as we're listening to the radio, we start to hear more and more structure fires grow out throughout the area. Second alarm equivalent, a little bit south of us, we didn't make it to, but it was just busy. And I was riding up in the car that day as the duty officer. So every time I'd hit my in-service button, I'd just try to head down to the interstate because the CAD loves you if you're next to the interstate. The CAD goes, you're going to go 65 miles an hour. So that's a good place to be. So every time I would strike in service, I'd head down along the interstate somewhere. And then just about 6 o'clock that evening, a full assignment came in for a brush fire with exposures. And dude, I'm like 2 minutes out. I'm sitting at the McDonald's lot and it came in and it's in the neighborhood I grew up in. So I knew right where it was. and tooling down the road, and all these other runs are coming out. I don't even think they had given us a TAC channel yet because it was just a typical response for the day. Get a little closer, could see some white smoke like it was a grass fire, pull into the neighborhood, start to see a little bit more, and then turn the corner. And I think my size up was something like, we've got at least 3 houses going second alarm. So I've really analyzed this, and we had a really good critique about a week later, post-incident analysis, whatever you want to call them afterwards. And a lot of good came out. But prior to that meeting, I really analyzed the tapes of the call. I really analyzed the times. And I kept stressing earlier how resource friendly St. Louis County is. We never run out of companies. Well, that day we did. And so pull up and multiple houses going, high winds. And we've got this nasty zoysia grass in St. Louis, and it's brown as can be, and it's still brown in March. And the wind was just taking it down the block. And the engine from my house got there first. And I'm trying to assign companies as they get in. And I set my engine down one of the streets to the last house that was burning, because I've talked to so many people. Well, you just needed to get in front of it that day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's easy to say when you got
right.
3 different streets involved, So those guys stretched, and then just assigning the first alarm assignment in. I knew the second alarm was coming, but I didn't realize, shame on me, I didn't realize who those second alarm companies were, because by this time we were operating on a TAC channel, and it was just going crazy. Turns out our second alarm companies were companies that usually come on a 5th alarm.
That's a little bit different on response time for sure.
Yeah. And I remember trying to assign one company. I'm like, hey, have the next company go to this street. And I remember the dispatch, saying something like, oh, okay, well, they're coming, but it's going to be a while, So by now we start to get a couple of the chief officers there. Chief Hampton, the chief of the Ferguson Fire Department, showed up, and I was talking to him the other day and listening to the tapes. He had the best size up but best radio transmission of the day. He says, hey, I need a special for one more. No, just go ahead and make it a 3rd alarm. Yeah. So when we call for alarms, just as you do or anybody else, they're coming quick in a suburban urban area, It didn't happen that day. And looking back, that was the biggest lesson learned. I think on that 3rd alarm, we get 6 companies on each alarm. Only 2 of the 6 actually made it to the scene. 3 of them were St. Louis City companies. And it turns out, we didn't know it at the time, St. Louis City was just as busy. So they had shut down mutual aid to the county that day. So boom, we lost those 3 companies. And then one of the county companies that was coming, they pulled up on a separate house fire a couple miles away. So I think the Ferguson chief was asking who was coming in on the 3rd alarm. And I think this is the first and only time I've ever heard the radio transmission of, we do not have any more resources to give you.
Wow. Hopefully that'll be the last time you guys ever hear that.
Right, exactly.
And that's why I wanted to have that, just you share a little bit of that scenario. And looking at, you sent me a few pictures, video of your engine out there, and I'm watching the video, and you can see even on the video just how fast this fire was moving on you guys. And I love that you said that. Guys will look at that video and go, why didn't they just get in front of it?
Yeah,
not quite that simple.
Right. The video I sent you, that was actually the second location for my engine. Mm-hmm. Early in the fire, we had set them up at a different location. And what the fire had done, it was traveling up 2 streets. And where we saw was going to be a great location for them, it turns out the fire was going up the other street, coming through the backyards. Next thing you know, we look up the street, and I couldn't give you a timeline of when but I looked up the street about 4 or 5 houses, and then you saw some houses on fire there. So I told it was an acting officer on that engine that day. I said, drop your lines, don't pick them up, and just drag them down the street. And they drove down about 6 houses, I guess. And that's where you see them in the video. But yeah, I've never told my guys to do anything like that. Hey, drop the lines and just drag them down the street. I've never had to written or write off structures before.
Yeah.
That's something you do in the big cities, or you hear about it in tales from long ago of these huge firestorms. We had to do that day after we relocated my engine. I said, fire stops here. We wrote off about 3 or 4 structures, but we knew we needed to make a stand, and that's what we did, and mission accomplished. It took a while, but we made a stand, and that's where the fire stopped.
At one time, how many houses did you guys have going?
I believe the total was 14.
And how many people?
I think we wound up only having 1 victim that day.
I was talking about how many firefighters for 14.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It did go to 4 alarms, so we probably get about 30 firefighters on each alarm. So 30. So well over 100, firefighters that day.
But not all there at once.
No,
like FDNY can hit that button, there'll be 100 guys there instantly.
No.
In your case, and I love that you're, look at that. And I talk about, and I think all of us talk about this when we're teaching, is best case scenario is everybody's in the firehouse at the time of the first alarm.
Yeah. Second
Alarm companies are all in the firehouse at the time of the second alarm. But when you start talking about wind-driven events like you're talking about, or the massive amount of tornadoes. So if a tornado is coming across the metro, it's not going to be just your area affected. It's going to be miles and miles and miles where you just can't hit the button and say, hey, send me 20 companies. So I think departments, and when we're developing new officers, always have that in your mind. And I love that you talked about having to, here's our standpoint. No, it's not. This is our new standpoint. And you guys made the stand there. So very interesting to hear all that coming directly from somebody who had just experienced watching house after house after house after house after house out in Cali go down.
Yeah, obviously it was a micro incident compared to that,
yeah.
but there were similarities too, Todd.
Sure.
And one thing I remember on night 1 out at the Palisades, as the whole neighborhood was burning and there were no fire engines around, was all the smoke detectors going off in the neighborhood. And that's a memory I'll never forget. But guess what? The fire we had, I was standing out in the middle of the street talking to one of the other chief officers there, and I heard the same thing. It was really eerie. It brought me right back to California 2 months earlier. The whole neighborhood of smoke detectors going off. Yeah,
wow. Very, very interesting.
So one more thing. You mentioned tornadoes. Well, that was the end of the day. There were talks of severe tornadoes throughout the Midwest. It's like, where's Jim Cantori at? If he's in your town that day, it's time to get out, kind of thing. But high winds all day, and then the tornadoes started heading our way. And we were getting the command center was getting reports from the EOC, St. Louis County. It's coming your way, boys. It's coming your way. I've never seen guys pick up hose so fast. And for those of you listening that knows what a tornado siren is, the tornado sirens went off. So we're still picking up line as these tornado sirens are going off, which was kind of crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, you don't want to say cool experience, but you also want to say what, the lessons learned is what I always look at. In the heart of it, you're not thinking about that, but the afterwards, when we go sit down and go, what I learned, but, especially when you got a couple of really young dudes on that fire scene and they're picking up all this stuff, and then be able to go back and share not just what they did on the firefight because they're task focused, but be able to share, here's why we had to move the apparatus. This is why we called for, 4 alarms. And then they'll have that moving forward when they're, the captain one day or the lieutenant, depending on the system. And very, very cool. Dave, what we always do is you're just going to give us kind of a final shout out or kind of the last piece of Dave Dubowski advice.
Oh, well, that's a simple one. Never stop loving the job. I mean, if you never stop loving the job, and sad to say, there's guys out there that don't. But what happens then is the job doesn't love them back. and they miss out this incredible thing called being a firefighter. And, how many times, hey, it's the greatest job in the world. It's the best job in the world. I got to figure out who said this, because I just heard this about a year or two back, and I got to give them credit where credit's due. But I want to take that a step further and repeat the message that I heard. Yes, it's the greatest job in the world if you're good at it.
100%. Boy, and this job's a lot of fun when you're good at it.
You damn right,
man.
Yep.
When you're good at it, it's a good damn time.
Yep.
I want to kind of echo that, and also on behalf of our podcast and our guests over these years, just our deepest sympathies and condolences to everybody with Miami-Dade, Captain Bill Guston's family on his recent passing. I thought, I always knew one of the things that, and a lot of guys have really cool catchphrases and little cool ass T-shirts, but Captain Guston always preached about always being a student.
Yeah.
And he didn't preach it though. That's what separates some people. He didn't preach the message. He actually lived the message. I heard more stories this week about how Captain Guston was in my class, friend of mine, friend of ours. They found one of his old notebooks, and they actually shared with him notes he had taken from this guy's class. And I remember being very nervous seeing Captain Guston aisle third row at CFT one year, listening to my class, and then him coming up to me and telling me what a good job I did, young man. And again, all of us can preach really cool ass messages. There's a big difference in preaching it and living it. And Captain Guston lived it every single day of his life. 100% for sure about that. So I could not let the show go all the way to the end without saying that before we get out of here.
Right on. And I got to talk to Captain Guston just about a month back, because the Fools Convention this year is going to be down in West Palm Beach. And he gave me one last bit of advice. And I'll always treasure my last phone conversation with Bill. And I said, hey, Chief, and Chief or Captain Guston was going to be a speaker down at the Fools Convention this year. And we said, well, hey, let's take a trip down to Miami. We're that close. Why not go to Miami? He says, Dave, there's only two things in Miami. He says, overpriced drinks and the most beautiful women you'll ever see in your life. And to me, that's classic Bill Guston.
Yeah, 100%. That's something that you'll never forget. That's for damn sure. Again, thank you, everybody, for supporting us, and keep listening. Always be a student, and we will see you very soon. I don't know the exact date. That's not my job. Thank you.